Welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. My name is John Cameron, and I'm your moderator for the evening. You're normally used to seeing Richard Fields here. He's way taller, and he sort of has a little bit more hair, but not nearly as good looking. And for a living, I work for Pacific Legal Foundation as a development officer, which is a euphemism for fundraiser, because if we put fundraiser on our cards, no one would ever talk to us. And what I do is I raise money so that our wonderful, wonderful lawyers can defend the Constitution of the United States, suing government entities, regulatory agencies, free of charge for our clients who are being trod under the boot of the state. And I want to introduce my guests. I'm going to ask first Gerald to tell you a little bit about himself. Go ahead.
My name is Gerald Clift. I'm an attorney. I do computer programming, and I'm a liberty activist.
And Brett?
And I'm Brett Owens. I'm a co-founder of a software company called Lead Dino, where we make marketing products that help small businesses.
Cool. And then a little bit different tonight, where we're all going to tell you a little bit about our three listeners that are out there in the live TV land, maybe 6 tonight. It's an exciting show. A little bit about how we got into the liberty movement, what got us here and what keeps us here. And Brett, do you want to start out and tell people why you were drawn to the liberty movement?
Sure. Well, I went through the normal progression of looking at both parties. I like the alleged fiscal conservatism of the Republicans. I like the social liberalism of the Democrats. Realized I was what there was already a term for, a classic liberal, basically a libertarian, someone who believes in a conservative fiscal policy, social liberal policy, basically do whatever the heck you want, just don't bother anyone else, and get left alone so you can do your own thing. So that's how I was drawn to libertarianism.
Leave me alone. Yeah, I like that idea. Gerald?
Similarly, I was disillusioned by the two parties. I felt really passionately about the idea that you should be able to make decisions that might be bad for you, but they're your decisions. And I started seeing these debates of this Congressman Ron Paul, and I thought, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. And I started getting more involved. I went out to help him on several occasions. Even went to Iowa in 07. And just tried to, and continue to try to help the liberty cause as much as I can.
Well, and I came to libertarian thought really through objectivism. I read some Ayn Rand, I think, when I was 15 or 16, and it seemed to me that libertarianism, the liberty movement, objectivism, really mirrored nature, which the far left has co-opted as through the ecology movement, as a means to try to turn this country into a socialist state. And nature punishes bad decisions, rewards good ones, rewards effort, punishes sloth, and fierce competition leads to a stronger, more vibrant pack or tribe or whatever. And it just seems so logical to me that the lessons of nature should be lessons of how we should be not governed, and so that's really how I came to it. So I think I'll probably beat that to death a little bit there. And then our first subject for the evening is kind of scary. The Justice Department is asking for data on Trump protesters. Gerald, would you like to open discussion on that?
Yeah. So this is a abhorrent warrant that the Justice Department is trying to serve on a company. I forget their name. I want to say they're DreamHost. DreamHost. Thank you. Okay. And basically, a group of people, citizens concerned for their country, regardless of how you might feel about them politically, they wanted to protest Trump. So they went to this website that DreamHost hosted and basically tried to organize, send messages to each other. And now the Justice Department is asking for, it's about 1.3 million IP addresses from all of these people that just visited this site. So they weren't even necessarily at the protest, but visited, sent emails to the website's organizers, and they want all the information on these people they can get. They've specifically asked for addresses. Like I said, they want the IP addresses, they want their names, they want They want draft blog posts. They want blog posts that weren't public. They just want everything they can get. So the attorneys for DreamHost are, among other things, saying that this violates the Fourth Amendment, that it's not particular enough. You can't just say, I want everything that this website ever had without being very specific about what you need. And but taking a step back, it's more concerning thing about it is just a chilling effect on free speech. I mean, the right to protest is foundational to our country. It's the First Amendment. We were allowed to peaceably assemble, and to go after people that weren't even there just because you visited a website, it not only does it seem insane to me, but I think it's very concerning for the future, and a bad sign of this happening so early in the presidency.
Question, so what is the motivation? Was it because some of the people who went to, DreamHost was fomenting rebellion, or some of the people that went there performed violent acts, or what was their motivation for this kind of blanket approach to identifying a couple miscreants?
Yeah, they're claiming that some people at these protests were being vandals, being violent, but this blanket order, to me, it goes way past the line of what's reasonable.
Smacks of police state to me.
It's very much smacks of
So,
police
I mean,
state.
if some people at this rally were being vandals, wouldn't eyewitnesses and security cameras be able to identify those people rather than saying, give me 1.3 million IP addresses plus all their blogs and everything else? I mean,
Yeah.
isn't that normal police procedure? If, let's say there's an assault in the city of Sacramento, you don't go to all the hosting companies in the world and Comcast and AT&T that handles the traffic and say there was an assault on Q Street. I want everything that everybody in Sacramento has talked about on the web so that I can identify those people. That's insane.
Yeah, it'd basically be like going after Facebook and saying, there was that assault
Well,
in Sacramento.
I think you should go after Facebook, but for a whole different reason. So.
We're just going to hope we're going to find one private message where someone messaged someone else and said, yeah, I assaulted that guy. I mean, it's a ridiculous concept.
It's a scary ask. On the bright side, good for DreamHost. So used to tech companies just rolling over like dogs anytime the government asked them for data
like
on
Google and
wallets. Exactly. DreamHost does charge for their product. We're actually a DreamHost customer, and now even prouder to be one.
I might move they're a hosting organization.
Hosting company. Yeah.
I might move I know we're not talking about dollars and cents here, so I think we can talk about them. So DreamHost supports the Constitution of the United States. That's something to know, folks.
That's right. Yeah. So good for them. They've been standing tall, and they also have a very good hosting service, so you won't regret it.
That almost sounds like a paid commercial endorsement. But all right. So the next subject for the evening, I think, I'd like to talk about is a program to identify and mentor/pay with private charity criminals committing gun crimes to rehabilitate right here in the city of Trees, Sacramento, California. Gerald, do you want to talk about that one again?
Yeah, so this was an interesting Sacramento Bee article about this program. I think it's called Advance Peace. They've been doing it in Richmond for a few years, about I think since 2010. And what they do is they target people that they believe are going to commit gun crimes. So specifically in Sacramento, they've done a study within Sacramento the city has that found that these 50 people are the people most likely to commit gun crimes here. So they want to target those 50 people with mentoring, job placement, and even payment as much as $9,000 a year. So that's where it gets kind of murky. People are like, well, you're paying criminals, but
you're paying potential criminals.
Some of them are known criminals that have committed crimes, and that's how they've identified that these people are.
So use a gun, get $9,000 kind of.
Well, they have to hit certain benchmarks along the way, and what's the stickler is that they have to be paid out of private charities, not through government. So the program itself is $1 million for all the mentoring and the job placement and trying to get them rehabilitated, but the actual payment, direct dollars to them, would only come from private charity. But what's so good about it is that this has been done in Richmond and has already proved to work. They had a 57% reduction in gun homicides for gangs after implementing this program, and it's much more effective than just some random gun control proposal saying, well, the gun's the problem. It's if you want to commit a crime, you're going to find a way. So we have to get at the underlying intent, and that seems to be what they did in Richmond and what they're trying to do in Sacramento now.
Cool. Okay. So I just did some numbers. If you're saying this program costs $1 million, there's 50 people in it, it's $20,000. That seems like a lot of money, but if those people actually do a gun crime, then you have hospital costs of the victim, the incarceration costs, the policing costs, the court costs, the prison guard, correction officers, salary, and all the rest of that. I think that $20,000 would probably be, I think, a tenth of the real cost if they did commit a crime, maybe even a hundredth.
Yeah, I mean, just the incarceration cost alone, I think, is $70,000 a year per inmate. It's a lot of money.
Wow, I could incarcerate myself pretty nicely for $70,000 a year. There must be some layers of bureaucracy there, folks. All right. So, it's worked in Richmond, and now they're trying it in Sacramento. And has the program been running long enough for them to see some results, or?
Yes, about 7 years in Richmond. So they're saying, you know what, it seems to be working here. Let's try it somewhere else. Now the pitch is to the city council, let's try to do this program here. And there's mixed support. Some city council members are interested. I think the incoming police chief has said he's open to the idea and wants to research more. But then
in Sacramento?
In Sacramento, yes.
Okay.
And then, but I believe the sheriff is opposed to it. And I get the argument. The concern is like, hey, we're rewarding these people for being criminals. But if your intent is truly to reduce homicides, there's this pilot program seems working very well in Richmond, which has a bad homicide problem.
Oh, Richmond's got quite the rep.
Yeah. So if it works there, and we could get it to work here, if we try it out, maybe this is something we could implement more throughout the country and actually work on a method that reduces crime and specifically homicides, rather than, like I said, just point the finger at guns. I mean, the whole gun argument is ridiculous. If you look at the United Nations data, for example, on guns and homicides, and you look at the United States, if you look at the non-gun homicide rate, so you're not counting guns, your baseball bats,
baseball bat,
knives, everything else, that homicide rate is lower than higher. The non-gun homicide rate is higher than almost every nation in Europe when you count their gun homicides and the regular homicides. That's just our non-gun homicide rate. So we have a violence problem here that's not being addressed.
In the U.S., our non-gun homicide rate is higher than other countries' total homicide rate.
Yeah, in almost every country in Europe. I'm talking England, Germany.
And those are basically gun-free zones.
Yeah, so it's not the guns is the problem. We have a violence problem here. And I think it's largely due with our incarceration rate. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, and so per capita, but also the most total. We have 25% of the world's prison population, but we're only 5% of the population. So,
and if there's some statistics I'd like to throw out, talk about these crimes hurting. If you're a young black man, I think you have in your lifetime a 1 in 6 chance of going to prison. That's and the other thing is that if you go to prison, it's a felony, or else you wouldn't be in prison. So you lose the right to vote, at least temporarily. You can't own a gun to protect yourself. There are many, and this is forevermore. It's not, you do your time, you've served your time, and then you get a clean slate. You can't enter into many professions. I don't think you can even be a contractor. So your economic choices are limited. So you're really almost forced to maintain that cycle of crime. So a lot of people are punished by it.
And we basically throw them into a training camp to learn how to be better criminals. That's the worst part about it.
Training camp for crime. Yeah.
The alternative approaches seem promising. It couldn't be worse from certain perspectives. Baltimore also is working on a type of alternative approach where they've got ex-gangsters that they have working on their side, and they're trying to do something similar where they're getting close to kind of the gang leaders and such. And again, promising early results there. Small budget, modest, I think 1.6 million is what they're working with.
Is that public money or private money?
That is public money.
Okay.
Yeah, that's from the Baltimore PD.
Well, there are successful examples of, we talked about, you go to prison, really it's a school for crime. And in my travels, I think it was like 10 years ago, I was in line to get on an airplane. I started chatting with somebody just in case their organization needed training, because I was working in training. And the guy said he's a warden for a private prison in Florida, I think. And we were talking about the evils of public prisons, especially in California. He said, "Yeah, I got a pretty good program going. My recidivism rate is like about a third of what it is from standard prison population." I said, "Whoa, how are you doing that?" He said, "Well, prisons, it's the whole idea of corrections is that people should learn new behaviors so that they can go out and become productive citizens." And so in the past, what we did was just train people. We gave them a trade. And then we discovered that the recidivism rate was exactly the same with a trade or without. So what we did was we looked at the overall problem, and some very smart people said, well, the problem is that these people don't have a couple of skills. And one is taking ownership for their actions. And another one is understanding how to deal with authority figures. So they trained people in those two skills for months, and then only after they were sterling examples of owning their own behaviors and activities and effectively dealing with authority figures, then they put them in the trade program. And the combination of those, turning people into adults first and then showing them how to play with toys second, reduced the recidivism rate tremendously. So there are some working things out there. They're just not ever implemented in the state of California. So, and Brett is going to talk about something very interesting, an unlawful supervised injection site running in the U.S. with positive results. Brett, you want to tee that one up?
Sure, yes, I believe this is down in Southern California.
Well, actually, it's undisclosed location.
Undisclosed location where...
Because it'd be shut down.
Sure.
Because it works. Yeah.
Right, where drug users can walk into the facility and get their dosage of whatever they're doing. It's supervised, and then they go about their rest of their day from there. Mm-hmm. And it makes a lot of sense from a safety standpoint. I know probably one of the most insightful things I've ever read on substance abuse is by narcotics expert Keith Richards, where he said, hey, when people get into trouble with drugs is when they keep trying to up the doses, and then they overdose, and then they're done.
This guy named Keith, does he have a little bit of experience with that?
He's got a little bit of experience, maybe 4 or 5 decades worth of experience with drugs, still going despite whatever any doctor would say. And he said, you just keep it the same, and at least that's worked for him. But it seems to be working very well at this injection site as well in terms of
do you know if
standpoint.
Mr. Richards has ever overdosed? Has he ever, that you're aware of, has he ever been in the emergency room for his use of recreational pharmaceuticals?
I believe he's overdosed. I think that's how he knows he's gotten into some.
So here we have. I think, I don't want to cast aspersions on Keith Richards, but I think it's common knowledge that he's used narcotics for, 50 years or something.
Yeah, it's in his autobiography.
Yeah, so, and he's I believe he's alive. He looks kind of dead, but I think he looks like he's got some hard miles on him, but he gets up on stage at age 70 or whatever it is and performs a rather grueling profession. And it's because he's, in essence, because of his wealth, been able to do something properly, if you call that properly, that other people haven't been able to. So he's actually an example of what this kind of program, he's been in his own private version of that, could do. So let's just talk about the downside. Can you see any downside to taking people who have a problem that leads to theft and burglary and fraud and prostitution and all the rest to pay for their habit, and then taking away the incentive to do any of those things and simply providing them with their fix. Is there a downside to this that I'm missing?
Well, I think the downside would be, or the perception would be, that you're enabling the behavior by providing this service. That would be the perception. I think it goes back to the legalization of drugs argument. If you legalize and you lower prices, or you enable people, do you increase usage, or are people just going to do what they're going to do?
So what's one of you, I forget which one, threw out some numbers. Was it about Portugal?
Yes.
Yeah, and that if I'm correct, you're saying that the actual, when they legalized everything and the drug usage rate dropped. Do you know anything about the victimless and victimized crime rates in the country paralleling that? Did they also drop, or was that data not available?
I don't know specific to Portugal, but I know the United Kingdom did a study that found that I think the average heroin user did almost $100,000 worth of damage when vehicle theft, breaking into cars, robbing stores, but they could just pay about $10,000 to give them all the heroin they could possibly use for a year. And I think they actually
that's $100,000 a year they
yes,
did. Now
yes.
Is that pounds? Because that's at $1.3. Yeah.
I believe that's dollars.
Well, it's still, that's a chunk of change.
Yeah, so they actually took it a step further to public would pay for it. What's unique about this is that it's just flying under the radar entirely. Private expenditures, the government's obviously not paying for it.
So who's administering the drugs? Are these qualified medical people, or are they volunteers? Or
that's the thing. It's undisclosed, not a lot of information about it. But I read the article in the Guardian, and it appears to be working. It's only serving about 100 people, but they've had thousands of injections for these 100 people, and 2 people have overdosed on site. And because they were there, they were able to save their lives with the anti-overdose
because they
drug.
could give them an antidote to the poison, or I don't even know if it's called an antidote. I think it's probably not that far from us in the State House here in California. I'm guessing where all this that's where all this heroin's being used, based upon their ability to do logical things. That was an attempt at a joke that kind of flew right under the radar, because they're obviously stoned, folks. That's what I was trying to bring up. All right, so cool. I mean, that's kind of a libertarian thing happening there. Oh, I just blew the ears off our sound engineer there. I think the last thing that we want to talk about is the Trump campaign has talked repeatedly about the massive voter fraud in this country, and there are some people that think that this voter fraud exists. My brother, and that this huge conspiracy exists. My brother had probably the most insightful statement about conspiracies that I ever heard, especially government conspiracies. He said, "John, you've met people that work in the government. Do you think they could keep a secret?" So that's let's throw it open for discussion. Brett, you want to start off? Despite propaganda to the contrary, vote fraud seems to be a pervasive and malignant problem. What to do?
Well, I think on the fraud thing, it's more about districting, because it's an electoral system. So things are set up where districts are such that if Trump won certain areas, that would give him a chance to win the election despite not winning the popular vote. That, in my mind, opens it up to voter fraud, and I'm not worried as much, I guess, about a U.S. conspiracy as I am about the possibility of, did Russians hack, and all they need to do is fudge the numbers in certain districts, and they can do that. Doesn't seem like that's been adequately looked at in terms
Russians
of whether they did mess with it.
Yeah.
On one hand, hard to believe that could happen. On the other hand, when you think about who we might have working on our computer security at the national level, maybe it's believable there. So I think it's something that probably hasn't been looked at as much as it should have, and could probably easily be looked at by some impartial computer scientists, professors, if you can find them, to look at it and see, does this fit with what you would expect to be the voter distribution, or are we off here, and here?
Well, I'm going to throw out just kind of a wild conspiracy theory here. If you overlap the voting, the red-blue state map, over the map of Democrat, or over the map of which states require voter ID, which compared to which don't, there's almost a perfect match. So in the states that don't require people to identify themselves before they can vote, they vote for Hillary Clinton. In the states that require voter ID, they voted for Donald Trump. And that's a very strange correlation just to kind of happen. And then, kind of on a closing note on that, the Gallup poll, which is probably the most accurate polling organization the world has ever seen, they've really kind of designed the science around polling and were the model for it, predicted a victory by the Republican candidate in the first Obama election by about 2.7 million votes. And that 2.7 million vote number, the election went the other way, by the way, if you've been living in a cave, Obama won. And that 2.7 vote differential is what a lot of people are throwing around as the number for voter fraud in the country. So is there any reason why we shouldn't require people to show some ID when they do the most important decision they do in their lives every 4 years?
I think so. I think the voter fraud is highly exaggerated. I mean, there's a great Reason article about how basically it's not occurring. You're talking about maybe a couple dozen here and there, but specifically on why we shouldn't include it, we're giving the government too much power to prevent someone from voting. We already saw that in Florida, where many people who were eligible to vote were turned away. And
you mean by requiring voter ID?
Yeah, and I think when you give bureaucrats that power to prevent you from exercising a right before it's even counted, you get situations like Martin Luther King, where he wanted a concealed weapons permit and was denied because a government bureaucrat said, no, I'm deciding you can't. So you're giving a government bureaucrat the power to say, you're not this person, even if you are. And I think history has shown that power will be abused in the United States.
Well, I'm going to take a different tact. It doesn't sound libertarian on the face of it to require people to identify themselves before they vote. But we require ID in this country to buy liquor. We require ID to be presented on demand if you're driving your car somewhere. And this vote that we cast affects the future of ourselves and our children for generations to come in some cases, because the president is the one that selects Supreme Court candidates who have more control over our lives than probably the president themselves. And I have the last word, which is kind of cool. And I think it's about time. Thank you very much. You've been wonderful guests, not only for this live show, but when you see the recorded shows in the future, you're going to be amazed at their brilliance and depth of knowledge. My name is John Cameron, signing off for Libertarian Counterpoint. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful evening.